Hello and welcome to ETBFSI.com. My name is Amol Dete. And in our special series, Digital Dialogues, joining me today, two well known speakers from the BFSI space. And let me welcome them. My first speaker is Ms. Charu Mathur, the Chief Digital Officer and Head Business Strategy and New Initiatives at IndusInd Bank. Charu, glad to have you here.
Hi.
And my next speaker is Mr. Riddhi Datta, the Regional Sales Leader at Backbase. Riddhi, glad to have you.
Thank you, Amol. My pleasure.
So to begin with, Riddhi and Charu, we do a great discussion over here on the digital dialogues and try to understand how the bankers are actually going for digital strategy, how the tech companies are looking at it. And to begin with, Charu, I will ask you my first question specifically about the digital strategy. So I have seen a lot of initiatives which the IndusInd Bank has taken in last couple of years, specifically in the digital, whether it's video KYC, whether it's the IndusEasy credit card, and so many stuff. But to begin with, my basic question to you, Charo, is what is the bank's digital strategy? How do you actually, look at the digital business or the new business lines?
So, Amol, the way we look at digital strategy, essentially, there was a time when it was about creating seamless customer journeys, leveraging India stack. So it was about digitizing our businesses in savings, in term deposits, in insurance, investments, and all the various products. But increasingly, what we are seeing now is that there are clear shifts happening. Banking is becoming more and more frictionless and invisible. And, we need to be there where the client is, and we have to embed ourselves in a customer's life cycle. So that is one clear shift that we are seeing. And the second thing is that it's no longer about products, but end-to-end customer value propositions, which are completely experience-led and keeping a client segment in mind. And that is what we believe is going to be the next phase of digitization. And a lot of our initiatives in digital strategy of the bank are anchored by these two beliefs.
Okay, noted your points, Charu. I think that was good to begin with. Riddhi, I'm sure you must be talking to a lot of banks, financial companies, even before pandemic and after the pandemic as well. Let me take a liberty and say after the pandemic. What are the trends that you are observing across banks or across BFSI companies in tech in terms of adopting technologies?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Amol. Before I start responding with my point of view, I'll probably take you from what Charu said, because I was noting down some of the points that she was talking about. And the 3 points that I noted: one is embed yourself in the customer life cycle, where the client is, and it's no longer about the product. And I think not just in India, because we're a global organization, we're working with banks outside India as well. There is one common trend that we have picked out, and that common trend is that more and more banks are, for good, investing in what we define as platforms. Now, when we start talking about platforms, it leads at times to certain confusion in the mind of bankers and in the minds of some of our customers as well. And every time I take a small example, which I think illustrates the power of this platform story very well. And this example that I take is just outside India. This is a very well documented case study that Grab, which is, let's say, the similar thing of what Uber does in India. Grab is the car sharing, ride sharing app in Southeast Asia. Now, what Grab did when they launched in Indonesia a few years back, apart from their car sharing or the cab sharing, they also went into food delivery, like what Zomato does or Uber Eats does back in India. When they went into food delivery, the segment that they started going after are those small, if you've been to Southeast Asia, those small vendors who are on the roadside selling fish, rice, and on a banana leaf sort of a thing, right? Where they would keep it in front of the counter and wait for customers to walk by and pick it up. So Grab started going after these segments. They started signing up with these sort of end business owners or sole proprietors. And first thing that they started doing is offering food delivery in a digital manner. So one, these vendors, they started having their food delivered to diners through motorbikes and all of that. Second, their accounting system moved from pen and paper to more automated digital logs on the Grab app. But where the platform play came into picture was when, as the revenues, let's say, went up for some of these proprietors or these small business owners, one of Grab's partner, this company's name was Ovo, they started offering these short-term line of credit to these end consumers or to these end business owners. So in this case study's instance, Ovo started offering loans of up to 50 million Indonesian rupees, which is roughly, let's say, $4,000 US dollars, which was enough for them to open a new stall and expand their offerings. So this is when I'm talking about platforms, and we will probably correlate it back to how it works in the banking industry. But this is what we mean by platforms. That, let's say, a digital player like Grab offering services all the way from food delivery to lending to a very small, proprietor, say sole proprietor, who might not have had access to any of this in their normal day-to-day operations. So that is the trend that we have picked up, Amol, and probably we'll talk about it a little bit more as we go along. It ties very well to what Charu said, that because of these platforms, it's not only about products, it's more about embedding yourself in the entire customer life cycle and also being where the customer is at that point of time. So yeah, that's probably the biggest trend that we are observing in terms of how banks are adopting technology going forward.
I think valid points. I think continue with what Charu said about platform. I think it was a great example. And in fact, let me tell you, when you spoke about the food and the Southeast Asia, I could think of kimchi specifically from Seoul, South Korea, because I was lived there for a couple of months when I was doing my digital journalism course in Seoul National University. And it was really great fun. One important thing I still remember is, wherever you go, you used to have one tap card. You can charge it in any supermarket, any grocery store, and you can use the tap card for anything and everything, from taxi payment to bus payment to your metro payment. Honestly, it took me 2 days to settle down there because of the digital revolution which they had. I really didn't understand. So I think Grab was a great example, Riddhi. And, to continue our conversation, Charu, I will bring you back and let me discuss more about the digital strategy. Since you mentioned about the platforms, my question to you now is very specific. How are banks, and specifically IndusInd Bank, is building and leveraging digital platforms?
So there are certain shifts that we are now seeing, and we are also realizing that it's very important for us to plug ourselves in the ecosystem. And so the way we are now building platforms, there are certain fundamental principles that go into it. So one is that everything is sorry for a bit of a technical jargon, but everything is microservices driven, a common API stack. So essentially, I build it once and then I want to leverage it across various form factors and across various use cases. So my customer can come and get a credit card from my Easy Credit platform. If there is a partner, anybody who wants to originate credit cards, let's say any e-commerce platform, wanting to originate credit cards for their customers, can straight away plug into bank's APIs now. And the sales staff in the bank, whether it is relationship managers or outbound sales teams, they can all, essentially, it's a common stack that powers all types of customer journeys. And the way the platforms are now getting conceptualized is, so one is about having it as a common stack, which is powering all sorts of customer journeys. But the second thing is also it gives us enormous amount of agility, in the sense that it's not like a single journey that everybody has to do. If you want, you can expose the platform. If you have a partner where you only want to expose the decision part of the platform as a service, so whether where you just give a decisioning engine to the partner, that whether we will onboard this customer as a credit card customer of the bank or not, that is possible. You can expose the complete journey to the partners, or you can completely tailor make the journeys for specific partners. So that is one of the things which we are now seeing, that it's very critical to design platforms very carefully, to make them agile, to make them cloud native, because we don't want to be in a situation where you want to scale the business and you are having to wait for some hardware to be procured, etc. So the platforms auto scale, they are intelligent, they can handle 1,000 transactions a day and can scale up to 1,000,000 transactions a day with ease. And they are, of course, a common stack, which gives us the power to integrate ourselves wherever we want. Of course, directly on our mobile and web journeys, in our mobile apps, also with the various ecosystem providers. And it could be e-commerce players, aggregators, or various sorts of ecosystem providers, or the employee workforce in the organization at large. So I think it's a very powerful concept which we see playing out. The way Riddhi also spoke about it. The platform banking essentially makes the world open up for us, quite literally.
Okay, noted your points, Charu. I think that was too good. Riddhi, let me bring you here and let me understand your observation. So, did you observe by any chance in the strategy of the banks that there is some change, that the bankers are looking maybe for a short-term strategy right now, or they're still, are their long-term strategy still intact? Because I have seen certain changes with the pandemic, and the banks are maybe looking at certain things right now because they want to give that experience to bank, their customers right now. So, are you seeing or are you observing some difference between the short-term and the long-term digital strategy of the banks and the BFSI companies?
So I think, Amol, the last 12 months specifically has been an opportunity for banks, and not only banks, all sorts of financial organizations, to probably relook and sort of vet some of their long-term strategies. What we have observed, and I think Charu was also talking about in the first point, about not being a product pitch, but more about being, in the customer's life cycle. We also strongly believe that the traditional siloed banking model is not going to survive. Where let's say every channel, every department, every product team is still working in their silos. And going back to what Charu was talking in, as a response to the second question, there is very little amount of, let's say, reusability. There is very little amount of agility in terms of how the bank is pitching its products to the market. So obviously the industry is evolving, it will continue to evolve, but what we are telling banks and financial organizations these days is, and it might be a very strong statement, is that digital banking is dead. It's not about digital banking. Today and the future is the era of engagement banking, where as a bank, as a financial institution, you need to own the end-to-end customer engagement, just like the Grab example that I spoke about. So it's not just about digital, it's about how are you engaging your customers. So there are a couple of, purely from a strategy perspective, I think, and this is interesting for us, because this is not just in India, but also in countries neighboring India, in broader Asia. We have seen that more and more traditional banks are considering launching what we call as speedboats. As it could be an experimental strategy, but it could also be a long-term strategy where it's not just about digitizing the parent bank itself, but also creating probably a separate brand, a separate identity with no legacy in a way, right? Indian banks, and I'm sorry to say this, still there is a huge amount of a conservative mindset where, do I want to move my my parent bank technology on the cloud? Am I okay with it? Especially the enterprise applications where customer data and transactions are being processed. Am I ready to move it to cloud? Am I ready to move it to platform standardization? We are still seeing an amount of hesitancy there. That's where this trend of launching speedboats, trying to do experiments with the fresh stack, no legacy, is exciting. So I think that is one strategy that we are seeing more and more taking place with banks in India as well as in broader Asia. The other piece where we are seeing some movement happening, but probably a lot more has to happen, is this loosely defined space of what we call as onboarding and origination. Now, today you go to any Indian bank, you go to their website, you'll see that they will say, open a digital account because of the eKYC, BKYC norms that are there in place. But having said that, that entire automation or the digitization is probably still focused only on basic products like, let's say, a deposit or a savings account. Not a lot has happened yet on credit in terms of how lending is being done end to end. When I'm meaning end to end, right from the customer application process all the way to the back office, again, operating on the same platform, giving full transparency to both customers as well as internal employees. So that is an area where I see some action happening, where I see some experimentation happening, but probably not enough at the pace where what I'm seeing in other parts of the world. The third thing, and this would be my last point in terms of strategy, I think in India, especially because there is no clear guidelines around neobanks or greenfield banks, we see more collaboration or more openness to tie-ups between traditional banks and a lot of fintech organizations slash neobanks in the way that they are trying to project themselves to the market. So I think probably from a strategy perspective, the good part is that there is experimentation happening. The good part is that new ideas are being encouraged. But at the same time, I think still a little bit more needs to happen when it comes to real so-called digitization that we're talking about here.
Okay, I think few detailed points, Riddhi. Noted that, in fact, engagement banking is a very important and a nice term that you said. I think globally people are coming with really innovative terms. I think at Cybos, I heard a different term called emotional banking. You know, I think, and the session was all about how bankers need to be more emotional towards their customers and even employees as well. So I think quite interesting points, Siddhi. Charu, let me, ask you this question specifically about the product innovation and the behavior. So, if I ask you how has the user behavior evolved over different segments, and how is the IndusInd Bank's response actually to the same in terms of product or innovation strategy? What could be your observations?
I think user behavior, what has happened, in the consumer behavior is one is, of course, last year or last 1.5 year, I think everybody will say this, COVID has precipitated the shift to digital. I mean, we have seen customer segments migrate to digital. The sort of segments which have migrated to digital, people were very people, even micro entrepreneurs or the SME clients, the segments which one would imagine would have taken years to come onto the digital, that shift has happened within a matter of a few weeks. So I think COVID definitely precipitated the change. We have seen our digital transaction intensities go up, the volumes of the business happening digitally increase. And I think customers are now comfortable buying digital products online. Earlier it was about consumers were researching online, but they were still going back into a physical model via a branch or a relationship manager to make the final purchase. But I think increasingly customers are very comfortable if you give them a great experience, a frictionless journey. And like Riddhi said, it's about making banking engaging. It should not be like a complicated navigation that a customer goes through. Customers are more than comfortable buying digital products online. And I think they are looking for simple, simplified banking, banks who understand them, who understand their needs, and who understand their uniqueness. So what I see as a demand coming from customers is they want personalization. They don't want banks to inundate them with the products that we have. It is expected, it's almost hygiene expectation that we need to know that who you are, where you come from, and therefore we speak to you in a language that resonates with you, and we talk to you about products which help you grow your business, which help you safeguard your family or whatever there might be. So personalization is a very big shift, which I think the e-commerce companies like Amazon have done well. I just think that's the way forward for banks to adopt. It's extremely critical, and consumers just expect it as a hygiene, and rightfully so. Yeah, those are some of the things that I see evolving.
Yes, I think I agree with you. Most of the tech companies and the banks are going ahead with the personalization and trying to give customer experience, in a far more seamless and a meaningful manner. Riddhi, you mentioned about the neobanks. You also spoke about the fintech, and the fintech collaborations, the neobank partnerships are on the radar of all the BFSI companies. So let me, take your perspective here specifically on the fintech or the neobank collaborations or the partnerships. So if I could have asked you a question, fintech collaborations has moved from more technology-oriented integrations to a business-oriented, or is it a revenue sharing models? Because it started absolutely with the tech platforms. They started, giving tech platforms to the banks or the BFSI companies. But now when we see that they have matured a lot, are they also looking for like revenue sharing models, or they are just going for tech integration itself? And adding to that, how is it going to be, in a future? How do you see it? How do you see it in maybe a future or something?
Yeah, so I'll probably, give two perspectives on this, Amol. One is my personal perspective, which is more of a layman, of a novice, and then probably a slightly more industry perspective. My personal perspective, especially what I see happening in India right now, I am a bit confused. You know, if you see what's happening over the last 2 months, so many of these erstwhile fintechs, now neobanks, launching their offerings. You can see them all over social media, but at the back end, they are all partnering with traditional banks, and more or less, you'll find the same bank, without naming any one of them, the same bank at the back end of some of these neobanks. So at times I question myself, and then I know some of the people who are working at these fintechs. I ask them as well, what is your strategy? Why, what is your differentiation between yourself and, let's say, somebody else who has just launched 2 weeks back? And more often than not, frankly, this is just my take, I've not been able to find out that differentiation. And that is what I feel is, today it could be exciting. Somebody is saying, I'm giving you a credit in 2 minutes. Somebody is saying that, I'm giving you a higher interest rate. I'm just giving some examples. But in the long term, I think the differentiation is going to be very tough for them to stand out in the market. That's just my personal take. Now, coming to more of an industry standard response in terms of where neobanks are going. Is it more technology oriented integrations, or is it business oriented, or revenue sharing, as you asked? Let's try to understand how some of these neobanks are. And let's take one example from India. We keep on talking about open as a sort of a offering for SMEs, which is a new offering. And we talk about, let's say, something outside India. Let's take the example of Revolut, which started off purely by offering travel cards. So the point here is, all neobanks which have been successful, or relatively successful, they started off just by focusing on one business use case or one segment, rather than spreading themselves very thin. I think that is where my confusion also lies, that in India, the neobanks are trying to probably do too many things at one go, rather than trying to focus on one specific use case or one segment. Another case in point, I was, without naming this neobank, I was talking to one of the CXOs in one of these neobanks, and I was telling him, what's your strategy for the next 6 months? And the answer came, we are launching 8 different apps in the next 6 months. My immediate question was, what are these 8 apps going to do? So he said, this one is for this one is for this. Obviously, I did not want to really counter him to the wall, but I came out of this discussion very confused, that end of the day, for a customer, if the same brand, you're launching 8 different offerings, you're just going to probably dilute your overall brand value, rather than try to do one thing or a couple of things and do it well. So that is the main problem that I see when it comes to the way some of these neobanks are trying to approach the market in India specifically. Having said that, I don't want to say that neobanks are doing things always the wrong manner. And another data point that I'd like to add here, and I think this was a research that was done by Bain some time back, that if you look at some of the most successful neobanks, and let's take the example of a very simple metric, which is called as customer loyalty. Now, if you take it on a score of 0 to 100, and the higher the net NPS, or the higher the net promoter score, the more the loyalty. Neobanks, in the way they are doing some of these pure servicing, the way they are servicing their customers, their NPS was around 62, versus traditional banks, where they were still trying to do it digitally, but their NPS was around 31, almost half of what the NPS of neobanks was. So there is probably that is what it shows, that neobanks who are focusing on things in a small manner but trying to get it right are doing things better, rather than neobanks who are trying to spread themselves very thin by trying to do everything together. So that is my personal take. I am not, and probably people will not like to hear it, but I am personally not very convinced about the way some of the neobanking roadmap is coming out in India. It's a bit confusing for end customers. It might be exciting for them, but for end customers, it's a little bit confusing.
Thanks, Riddhi, for being so open and sharing your thoughts upfront about the new banks. In fact,
I might have just lost some business for the next 12 months to some of these new banks, but I just wanted to give my perspective here.
No, I think it's a very unusual but important perspective, because sometimes what you said is confused. Yes, many people I see, even sometimes even I'm confused to understand and decode what exactly the neobank model is. Though it sounds really great, that we have something like neobank, a whole digital bank, but RBI is against it. RBI has not clarified any of its stand till now. The central bank has not issued any guidelines. And even if you spoke like the world's top neobank, Chinja, from Australia. It failed miserably. Now, pandemic is one of the reason which they cited out, but there were a lot of things were cooking inside it, right? Because they gave a lot of huge interest rates to the depositors and all. I mean, that's a different story. So that's an amazing case study over there. So thanks for sharing that note, Riddhi here. Uh, so Charu, let me come back to you and ask you a question specifically about maybe neobanks. One, what is your observation about the neobanks? I'm sure you must be having some partnerships over there with some neobanks. What is your experience there? And adding to that, again, we have to differentiate again, banks and fintechs also. So I'm sure you must be having a lot of partnerships with fintechs also. So how the partnerships with fintechs have matured over the years for IndusInd Bank?
I think first on, when we talk about the neobanks, I think if we are talking about at the end of it, a full-fledged banking product stack, in the form of a neobank, which is a digital-only bank in the hands of a client, I I think we have to realize that what we have understood from our consumer research, when we speak to consumers, be it millennials or Gen Z, consumers look for trust and reliability and safety and security when it comes to their banking. I mean, they may be comfortable parking a small amount of money in a wallet, but when it comes to serious banking and financial management, they need that factor of trust, reliability, safety, and security. And I think to an extent, probably that is one of the areas or one of the reasons why neobanks lean on to the traditional banks, because that gives them that stamp of credibility. Second thing is also that at the end of the day, it has to be a profitable, sustainable model. And to make it a profitable, sustainable model, I think credit and lending plays a very important role at the end of the day, because we all know how the business is. If you are not lending essentially, then you have a very long road to profitability. It's hard to turn profitable without having the lending stack with you. And lending again requires a bit of capital. And therefore, again, probably another reason why we see a lot of these new banks collaborating with banks, in their business models. But having said that, I think the space is very exciting. I see some fintechs. Now, there are some specific niche areas where we have seen some fintechs do very fantastic work. I mean, if you see what has happened in the space of buy now, pay later, I mean, it has sort of given us a different perspective to look at the business. And India is quite underpenetrated when it comes to credit cards. So buy now, pay later as a product has definitely made its mark, if you see, and led by some of the fintechs which have done some very good work in that area. We are seeing that happen in the space of discount broking, wealth management. So there are exciting plays there. And we are also learning, we are observing, and we are seeing how to put consumer in the center and then design for a consumer. I think it's a very healthy awakening for the banks in a way that you could also design financial products like this in a very experience driven, engaging manner, instead of making it very complicated for customers. So I think it's great to have that. The way we look at these partnerships, and that is one of the reasons why we are designing all of our products now as platforms, so that they are ready to plug with various partners. One is we get access to clients, and customer acquisition is expensive. I think it's everybody knows that. So we get access to clients where we can bring our complementing banking products and services and can extend that to these clients. The second reason why we like engaging with these partnerships is that the way they think about consumer and the way they design their products, keeping very razor sharp focus on customer at the center. If we can leverage that and plug and play that in our digital stacks, then it allows us to quickly bring a very compelling value proposition to our customers. So that is our other objective in these partnerships. We want to bring their products into our digital stacks for our consumers and unlock that value proposition to our clients. And another area where we are actively partnering is also advanced analytics. I think while we do a lot of that in-house, and we are working on advanced machine learning-led models, but there are complex problem statements, and there are some very specialized fintechs which are now able to do a very fine job of analytics by, let's say, just knowing your mobile number and nothing else. And so those are some of the areas where I think we see a lot of value. And there is a bit of clutter, but there is a lot of value also in the space. We have to look for the valuable partnerships, and that's our endeavor.
Oh, okay. I think detailed one, Charu, a very meaningful one, in fact. I think the time is just, watch is ticking, but I still will take maybe one or two quick questions. And Riddhi, I will start with you. This is again a very important question on what we discussed about digital adoption. You know, right now, I'm sure when you speak to BFSI companies, what are the key elements of IT which you think the BFSI companies are looking at far more aggressively? That is part number one. In terms of their investments, in terms of their future digital strategy, or in terms of their future digital spend. So, what are those key elements that you think? And adding to that, what are the top maybe 3, 4 technologies that you think that BFSI companies should look at it?
Yeah, I think both the answers would have a similar chain of thought, Amol. One of them is or rather, two of them is something Charu also mentioned some time back. One is this entire offering for SMEs. I think there has a lot that has happened in India for pure personal banking or retail customers. A lot, I wouldn't say a lot, but a decent amount of work has also happened for large corporates. SMEs, which somewhere lies between the retail and the corporate segments. In the past, for some reasons, they were not really focused on. But I think with the pandemic, with whatever has happened in the last 15 months, there has been a focus towards them, whether it's in terms of how do you onboard them, service them, or engage them. So that is an area where there is a lot of spending, but there definitely a lot more can happen. I think there was a data point from the Financial Express which said that SME credit gap today stands at around USD 350 billion, which means that there is a huge opportunity for banks and financial institutions to probably attract SMEs in a much better manner. So that is one area. The second area, again, I think Charu mentioned when she was talking about platforms, is about cloud. Now you talk about, and you might be hearing some banks, some financial institutions saying we have moved certain things to cloud. But when you actually lift the hood and try to figure out what have they moved, more of internal applications, not really enterprise applications where processing and transactions are happening. Now, with most of the cloud companies having set up, their service centers in India, or the data centers in India, I think I would like to see more adoption of cloud among Indian banks and moving some of their more enterprise applications, whether it's on the engagement banking, on core banking, such things to cloud. And that's where scalability really comes up, as Charu was also talking about earlier. You don't need to bother about hardware, it's auto scaling and all of that. So that's the second area where I would like to see more happening within the Indian ecosystem. The third and final is going back to the platform story. And it's not just because I sell a platform, but I think I personally believe that the place where India is in, there is a lot of talent, there's a lot of point solutions that is out there in the market, right? And the problem that happens is at times I've seen banks are looking at these point solutions in isolation, in silos, rather than looking at a platform which can aggregate or orchestrate the overall value for end customers on one single layer. So you still have those point solutions, because I don't think no single platform can come in and claim that they can do everything. It would be very unrealistic if somebody does that. But the real power of a platform, going back to the Grab example, is orchestration. And that is where I would really love to see Indian banks start investing in platforms. Platforms will be your orchestrator, will do the value orchestration, aggregate data, and finally provide this unified customer engagement that we are talking about. So end of the day, I think what banks can look into practically is having those one platform, giving them a single view into their entire bank, into their customers' internal operations, which is cloud native, core agnostic. I think that is very, very important, because Indian banks are running multiple different versions of core banking systems. So it needs to be core agnostic. and obviously, security, which is a must when you're talking about customer data and transactions. So must be secure and have that agility to scale in the long term. And that is, I think, where something like Backbase comes in with that engagement banking platform that we're talking about. So broadly, these are the areas where I would like to see more investments and more spend happening. But I think we are moving in the right direction. But yes, there is room for more.
Okay, noted your points, Riddhi and Charu. I will also take your closing remarks specifically on the emerging technologies or the new trends that you specifically see in the technologies. I do remember that you spoke about cloud and AI, but if I still ask the key highlights or the major technologies that you see or the emerging technologies that you see, in near future, that will maybe revamp the banking system or the banks are going to adopt it or something like that on those lines.
So I agree with some of the things that I see. The key technologies which are becoming extremely critical for us as we build our digital platforms and stacks. One is, like I was saying, it's very critical to have everything in a microservices sort of a fabric, which is cloud native. It auto scales and gives you that agility. So, having it structured like microservices based APIs allows you to be agile and allows you to plug and play yourself in many different formats and fashions depending on the use cases. And having it cloud native, gives you the ability to auto scale without having to worry about addition of hardware or anything, and therefore makes your customer experience also sort of unaffected by certain load increases and so on and so forth, because the platform is intelligent enough to auto scale. So the API fabric, cloud nativeness are very critical for us. Cyber security is very important. I think we are doing a lot of work in that area as we open ourselves and plug ourselves into various ecosystems. We are increasingly very conscious of cyber security. So that's another technology which is very critical for us as we look into the future. And if I have to say one more, it would be advanced analytics. I think it's just whatever we talk about personalized customer engagement, how we do credit, fraud analytics in our decisioning engines. If we have to democratize credit and do real-time underwriting, and there are many applications where advanced analytics, advanced machine learning is very critical for us, and that's a core skill that we are beefing up continuously. So these are some of the things.
Okay, noted your points, Charu, I guess, and valid points from both of you. So I must say that in fact, it was a very informative session for me. Thanks for sharing perspective, both of you. So thank you so much, Charu, and thank you so much, Riddhi, for taking part into this conversation and sharing meaningful insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amol.
Thank you, Amol. It was very nice and enriching. Thanks a lot.